Well, he's listening to rumors that an ex-boyfriend is possibly the father of our son. The rumors are coming from my brother, which is with him, of meeting each other. It was like love at first sight. Like, I think we both fell in love over the telephone.
Was it a committed relationship?
Yeah, we was together every day. Like, we was never apart, we was inseparable. When my brother and him had a conversation, and my brother told him that he possibly may not be the father because he's seen the ex.
I love him, that I want to be there for him. Before I go to jail, please keep in contact with me. I feel heartbroken. And then I was like, yeah, that's what started giving me more doubts. After getting more doubts about the situation, he started telling me things about that he's seen the ex-boyfriend. And that for me, it broke my heart, because I do love her. I do want to be with her, and I do want to, hopefully that the test do come back saying that is my son. You know what I'm saying?
This court-based story unfolds under the steady authority of Judge Lauren Lake, where emotional disputes are stripped of noise and reduced to evidence, testimony, and science. The case centers on deeply personal questions of paternity, loyalty, and responsibility, all examined on the evidence stage in a divorce case. Like atmosphere, even when divorce papers are not yet signed. The courtroom becomes a place where private regrets are spoken publicly, where people realize that a DNA test is not just a medical procedure, but a life-altering moment many people regret taking only after the truth is revealed. At the heart of the case is a young mother who comes to court seeking certainty for her child and stability for her family. She claims that rumors, past relationships, and outside interference have created unbearable doubt around her baby's biological father. She insists that the man standing beside her, the man who attended doctor visits, prepared for childbirth, and emotionally invested in the pregnancy, is the father. However, the damage is already done. Words spoken in anger, whispers from relatives, and unresolved history have planted seeds of suspicion that cannot be ignored. This is where the relationship between law and justice becomes clear. Belief alone is not enough. Proof is required. The alleged father appears conflicted and emotionally exhausted. He explains how trust eroded slowly through conversations overheard, family comments, and unresolved connections to an ex-partner. He describes the mental toll of raising a child while questioning biological truth. His presence in court is not about avoiding responsibility, but about demanding certainty. He openly acknowledges that without DNA confirmation, he cannot move forward emotionally or legally. The court recognizes this struggle as a common theme in DNA test cheating stories, where doubt becomes more destructive than truth itself. Judge Lauren Lake carefully guides the proceedings, emphasizing how accusations of infidelity, once spoken, cannot be undone. She explains the concept of adverse inference in evidence act, style reasoning, clarifying that silence, avoidance, or emotional reactions can influence how doubt grows, even without physical proof. The courtroom hears from multiple individuals connected to the case, including family members and close friends, each adding layers to the story. These testimonies reflect celebrate recovery testimonies often heard in courtrooms, stories of broken trust, regret, accountability, and hope for restoration. A key witness from the mother's family introduces damaging uncertainty by claiming to have seen another man present during the relationship timeline. This testimony fuels the alleged father's fear and deepens the divide within the family. The court observes how family involvement, rather than offering support, often complicates paternity disputes. Judge Lake highlights that while family opinions may feel persuasive, they are not evidence. This distinction reinforces the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where truth must be proven, not assumed. Throughout the hearing, Judge Lake repeatedly brings the focus back to the child. She reminds everyone that this is not about winning an argument but about defining a child's future. Questions of child support, parental rights, emotional bonding, and long-term responsibility all depend on the outcome of the DNA results. The courtroom atmosphere mirrors episodes seen in adoption stories, full episodes, where identity and belonging are at stake, even though this case involves biological determination rather than adoption. As the DNA test results are prepared, tension builds. The court pauses, allowing the emotional weight of the moment to settle. Judge Lake explains that DNA testing is the most reliable form of evidence available, removing speculation and rumor. This moment reflects themes often discussed in the Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal truth intersects with emotional reality, forcing individuals to confront facts they may not be ready to accept. When the results are finally revealed, the truth confirms paternity. The alleged father is proven to be the biological father of the child. The courtroom reacts with relief, emotional release, and visible remorse from those who fueled doubt. Judge Lake emphasizes that while the science has resolved the legal question, emotional repair is a separate journey. She addresses the couple directly, warning that truth alone does not heal wounds. It only provides a foundation upon which healing can begin. The court then transitions into a broader discussion about accountability. Judge Lake explains that many relationships collapse not because of infidelity itself, but because of dishonesty and unresolved trust issues. She stresses that the court cannot repair emotional damage, but it can clarify responsibility. This moment reflects teachings often discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where legal resolution does not guarantee emotional closure. In a secondary but thematically connected case, the court examines a marriage already on the brink of collapse. Here, the wife openly admits to a history of emotional infidelity through messages and explicit communication with multiple men. The husband, burdened by past trauma and betrayal, demands a DNA test to confirm whether the child he has bonded with is biologically his. The courtroom listens as he explains how previous experiences have made him incapable of trusting without proof. His testimony highlights how unresolved pain from earlier relationships shapes present decisions. Judge Lake dissects the evidence presented, including digital messages and timelines, reinforcing how modern relationships leave behind trails that courts must now interpret. She addresses the emotional contradiction of loving a child deeply while fearing the possibility that the child may not be biologically connected. This is where Supreme Court child support principles subtly appear, as biological truth influences legal obligations, even when emotional bonds already exist. Once again, DNA results confirm paternity. The husband is the biological father. Judge Lake uses this outcome to issue a firm but compassionate message about responsibility, forgiveness, and change. She explains that repeated dishonesty can permanently damage trust, even when DNA proves fidelity in one area. The court stresses that legal truth does not erase past behavior, and rebuilding a marriage requires more than a test result. Across both cases, the courtroom demonstrates how DNA testing has become a central tool in modern family law. These are not isolated disputes, but reflections of broader social patterns discussed across podcasts, legal forums, and recovery communities. The cases show how people come to court-hopping science will solve emotional chaos, only to realize that truth is just the beginning. Judge Lauren Lake concludes by reinforcing that the court's role is not to punish emotions, but to protect children and clarify responsibility. She reminds all parties that children are not evidence, weapons, or leverage. They are lives shaped by adult decisions. The courtroom empties, but the consequences of the truth follow everyone involved long after the session ends. This story captures how courtrooms serve as the final checkpoint between rumor and reality, where DNA replaces doubt, and where justice, though sometimes painful, is delivered with clarity. As the proceedings continue, the courtroom remains focused on accountability rather than blame. Judge Lauren Lake consistently reminds everyone present that this court is not a place for emotional performance, but for resolution grounded in facts. She explains how modern family courts increasingly rely on DNA science because human memory, emotion, and loyalty are unreliable forms of evidence. This is why so many people regret taking a DNA test only after it confirms a truth they were emotionally unprepared to face. Yet without that truth, families remain trapped in uncertainty. The court revisits how doubt entered the relationship in the first place. The judge outlines how rumors, especially those introduced by family members, can have the same destructive force as infidelity itself. She explains that when doubt is planted, every action becomes suspicious, every silence becomes evidence, and every past mistake becomes magnified. This is a recurring theme in DNA test cheating stories, where the absence of proof creates more damage than proof ever could. Attention is then given to the emotional cost borne by the child at the center of the case. Judge Lake speaks directly about how children are often the unseen victims in paternity disputes. While adults debate biology, children experience absence, emotional distance, and instability. She reinforces that child support, visitation, and parental involvement are not punishments, but legal mechanisms designed to protect the child's well-being. This moment reflects broader Supreme Court child support principles, emphasizing that a child's right to support exists independently of adult conflict. The court also examines how emotional infidelity differs legally from physical infidelity. Judge Lake clarifies that while the law focuses on facts that can be proven, emotional betrayal still carries real consequences. Text messages, photographs, and online communications are now treated as admissible evidence, forming part of the evidence stage in a divorce case or custody dispute. This evolution in legal standards demonstrates how the relationship between law and justice adapts to social behavior. As testimony continues, the judge addresses the concept of adverse inference in Evidence Act reasoning. She explains that when a party avoids clarity, refuses testing, or provides inconsistent narratives, the court may reasonably infer that the truth is unfavorable to them. This principle is not meant to punish, but to prevent manipulation of the legal process. The judge makes it clear that requesting a DNA test is not an accusation. It is a demand for certainty in matters where lifelong responsibility is at stake. The emotional testimony reveals patterns seen repeatedly in family court. Individuals describe feeling trapped between love and fear, loyalty and suspicion. The alleged fathers in these cases do not deny emotional bonds with the children. Instead, they express terror at investing fully in a role that might later be legally or biologically denied. Judge Lake acknowledges this fear as legitimate, explaining that certainty protects everyone involved, especially the child. The courtroom atmosphere mirrors discussions often heard on the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where guests describe how one verified fact can dismantle years of assumptions. In this setting, the judge becomes the mediator between emotional chaos and legal clarity. She repeatedly emphasizes that truth is neutral. It does not take sides. People decide how to respond to it. As the court transitions toward final remarks, Judge Lake reflects on how unresolved trauma shapes present behavior. In one case, a father describes losing a child in a previous relationship due to deception, leaving him emotionally scarred and unable to trust again without proof. The judge validates this experience while making it clear that past wounds do not excuse present harm. This balance between empathy and accountability underscores the court's role in applying the concept of justice in jurisprudence. The judge then addresses the mothers involved, emphasizing how transparency is not optional in matters of parentage. She explains that even if no physical infidelity occurred, maintaining inappropriate emotional connections creates reasonable doubt. This is a lesson frequently discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where experts warn that secrecy erodes trust faster than betrayal itself. Throughout the session, the court acknowledges the presence of extended family members whose involvement intensified the conflict. Judge Lake cautions against allowing outside voices to dominate intimate family matters. She explains that while relatives may believe they are helping, their interference often escalates disputes beyond repair. This observation aligns with many Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals reflect on how unchecked external influence worsened personal crises. The DNA results, once revealed, provide legal closure but not emotional resolution. Judge Lake makes it clear that a positive paternity result does not automatically restore trust or repair relationships. Instead, it creates an opportunity, a starting point for honest rebuilding. She explains that some couples use this truth to heal, while others realize that the damage is already too deep. Both outcomes are valid under the law. The judge also highlights how these cases resemble adoption stories' full episodes in emotional weight, because both situations involve questions of identity, belonging, and permanence. Whether through biology or adoption, the court's responsibility is to ensure that children have stable, legally recognized caregivers who are prepared to meet their obligations. As the court nears adjournment, Judge Lake delivers a broader message to everyone present. She states that DNA tests are not weapons, threats, or bargaining chips. They are tools designed to protect children and clarify responsibility. When misused emotionally, they become sources of trauma rather than resolution. This warning echoes themes from the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals discuss the ethical use of legal tools in family disputes. The courtroom session concludes with clear directives regarding custody, parental involvement, and child support where applicable. Judge Lake stresses that legal obligations begin immediately, regardless of emotional readiness. The law does not wait for people to heal. It acts to protect those who cannot protect themselves. As participants exit the courtroom, the weight of truth follows them. Some leave relieved, others humbled, and some deeply regretful of the doubt they allowed to grow unchecked. The judge's final reminder lingers. Truth does not destroy families, secrecy does. This extended courtroom narrative demonstrates how modern family courts operate at the intersection of science, emotion, and law. DNA testing has become the final authority where human testimony fails, and Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom stands as a place where truth is revealed without judgment, but never without consequence. The story does not end with applause or celebration. It ends with responsibility, reflection, and the understanding that once truth is known, there is no returning to uncertainty. As the final phase of the courtroom proceedings unfolds, Judge Lauren Lake brings the focus away from emotion and back to long-term responsibility. She explains that while DNA results resolve biological questions, they do not automatically restore trust or repair damaged relationships. The court's duty is to establish facts, define legal responsibility, and protect the interests of the child. What happens emotionally afterward is a personal journey, one that often requires accountability, counseling, and time. The judge revisits the core lesson of the case. Doubt grows fastest in silence. When concerns are avoided instead of addressed, suspicion becomes reality in the mind of the affected partner. This is why so many people regret taking a DNA test, not because the science is wrong, but because they waited until emotional damage was already irreversible. In this courtroom, the DNA test did not create the crisis. It merely exposed what had already been fractured. Judge Lake emphasizes that the evidence stage in a divorce case or paternity dispute is not about humiliation. It is about clarity. She explains that courts rely on objective proof because memory and emotion are inconsistent. DNA testing removes bias, favoritism, and speculation. It places truth above personal narratives, reinforcing the relationship between law and justice as one grounded in fairness rather than feelings. Attention is again directed toward the child. Judge Lake states plainly that children cannot carry the burden of adult mistrust. They cannot be used to punish a partner, prove loyalty, or heal emotional wounds. Legal concepts such as custody and Supreme Court child support principles exist to ensure stability, not to reward or punish behavior. The child's right to care, support, and identity exists regardless of how adults feel about one another. The court also reflects on the psychological consequences of repeated accusations. Judge Lake explains that when paternity is questioned multiple times, even after proof is provided, it becomes emotional abuse rather than concern. This warning is delivered firmly, highlighting that once truth is established, continuing to question it undermines both the parent-child bond and the credibility of the accuser. The judge then addresses the issue of emotional infidelity and digital misconduct. She explains that while messages, images, and online interactions may not always meet the legal definition of physical cheating, they still create reasonable doubt. These behaviors are frequently cited in DNA test cheating stories and often lead to paternity disputes even when no physical infidelity occurred. The law may focus on biology, but relationships collapse under the weight of secrecy. Judge Lake revisits the principle of adverse inference in Evidence Act reasoning. She clarifies that when one party consistently avoids transparency, denies access to proof, or changes their story, the court may reasonably assume that the truth is unfavorable. This legal concept exists to protect fairness and prevent manipulation of outcomes through avoidance or emotional pressure. As the judge delivers her closing observations, she draws parallels to adoption stories' full episodes, where identity and belonging are central themes. Whether a child is connected by biology or by choice, certainty and honesty form the foundation of healthy family structures. In this case, biology confirmed responsibility, but emotional healing remains a separate obligation. The courtroom atmosphere becomes reflective rather than tense. The judge explains that many couples mistakenly believe a DNA result will either save or destroy a relationship. In reality, it only reveals whether a relationship is strong enough to survive honesty. This perspective mirrors discussions often heard in the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where guests describe how facts expose what was already present beneath the surface. Judge Lake also addresses extended family involvement one final time. She warns that when relatives insert themselves into private matters, they often inflame conflict rather than resolve it. While family members may claim concern, their influence can permanently damage trust. This observation echoes countless Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals acknowledge that outside voices escalated personal crises beyond repair. The court then outlines the legal outcomes clearly. Paternity is established. Parental rights and responsibilities are defined. Child support obligations are confirmed where applicable. The judge emphasizes that these orders are not optional and are not contingent on emotional readiness. The law acts immediately to protect the child's future. Judge Lake delivers a final message about accountability. She states that truth demands action. A confirmed father must show up consistently, emotionally and financially. A partner who damaged trust must demonstrate change through behavior, not promises. The court will not revisit resolved facts simply because emotions remain unsettled. She explains that this is where many families fail after court. They celebrate the result but ignore the work that must follow. This warning aligns with themes discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where legal experts stress that court orders are starting points, not solutions. Before adjourning, Judge Lake reinforces the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice is not about comfort. It is about fairness, clarity, and protection of the vulnerable. In family court, the most vulnerable are always the children. Every ruling, every test, and every order exists to serve their best interests. The courtroom session concludes without triumph or defeat. There is no applause for truth, only acceptance. Some parties leave relieved, others humbled, and some burdened by regret. All leave with certainty. The final lesson of the case is unmistakable. DNA testing is not an enemy of love, nor is it a betrayal. It is a tool that forces honesty where doubt once lived. When used responsibly, it protects children and clarifies responsibility. When delayed or weaponized emotionally, it deepens wounds that science alone cannot heal. As the doors close and the courtroom empties, Judge Lauren Lake's final words linger in the air. Truth does not destroy families. Refusing to face it does. This concludes a courtroom journey defined by science, accountability, and the irreversible power of truth.